All right. We are live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. I am Kayla Bowen, digital media marketing specialist for Byram Healthcare. And at Byram, we know that life takes care, and this is one way we're fulfilling our purpose to have this conversation today. So I am joined by Kathryn and Jennifer, and I'll have them introduce themselves in just a second. But first, I have to give a little disclaimer. Nothing stated today is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, but is instead for information purposes only. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have about a medical condition or treatment before undertaking a new regimen, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking advice because of something we say here today. So today we're going to be discussing managing diabetes during the summer months, how to live your best life during the summer, and make the most of this time of year. So, Kathryn, do you want to give us a little introduction?
Yeah, so I am Kathryn Gentile-Alvarez, and I actually personally live with type 1 diabetes myself. I was diagnosed when I was 12 years old. I am an exercise physiologist and diabetes care and education specialist working at integrated diabetes services with people all over the world.
Amazing. And Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm Jenny Smith. I am a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes care and education specialist. I also live with type 1 diabetes and have since I was 13, and also work with Kathryn at Integrated Diabetes Services, where we work with all people with diabetes, but very, very much with those who have intensive insulin management or type 1 diabetes. But we work with people all over the world, which is fantastic to be able to touch so many lives with diabetes and also learn the differences country to country and area to area in how people navigate.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for joining today. So let's start off with some general summer wellness tips. So maybe Jenny, if you want to talk about the importance of staying hydrated and how to manage blood sugar levels in like the heat.
Yeah, and I know a number of areas around the country here in the US we've had a heat wave in a lot of different places lately. So definitely staying hydrated is really, really important in terms of blood sugar management and with diabetes. And for those who also use devices such as continuous glucose monitors, they rely on proper hydration in terms of accuracy for the data that they provide you with. So it's really important to stay hydrated. And a lot of people, I think of hydration and they think of water only. But really, when we take in a lot of water, you can actually sort of overhydrate and sort of pass out a lot of those good electrolytes as well. So staying hydrated should definitely include some good, maybe non or unsweetened, non-caloric types of electrolyte beverages, which there are so many on the market today, some in powder form, some in pre-mixed form, kind of taking those wherever. If you're an athlete who loves to be outside in these really, really hot weather months, taking in definitely more than you might even during the fall or the winter becomes really important. Making sure that you've got, also cover, which helps your body to also kind of regulate heat a little bit better and obviously not get sunburned, which doesn't feel the greatest. Certainly can be an inflammatory response by the body, and with diabetes that can actually create a rise in your blood sugar and your overall sort of medical strategy for navigating. So hydration is really key. Herbal teas are also nice if you really don't love the taste of just plain water, or a little bit of lemon juice in water, dropping a couple of strawberries or some mint leaves or cucumber or any of those into a bottle of water gives it a nice sort of different taste, but also just keeps with the hydration.
Yeah, really good point about the electrolytes. So going off of what you said about the sun exposure, do you have any insights about sun safety and how that interacts with diabetes management?
Sure. Kathryn, do you want to chat, or do you want me to touch on that?
Yeah, you
You're
can continue
the one
going.
who's in Florida, so.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
Florida.
we should hear from Kathryn if you're in Florida.
Yep. So definitely the sunscreen is very, very important, and also protective eyewear. Those UV rays can get quite strong, so that direct contact with the sun we want to avoid. Utilizing hats is a good idea. Your facial lotions that you might put on every morning, making sure there's some SPF in there, and considering utilizing like those long sleeve swim shirts just to protect your skin from the sun when you're outdoors. Bringing sunscreen where you go, because you're going to need to apply it more than once in the summer months in most places. All really important things.
Is
The
there?
thing about sunscreen, I was going to say, is that we even have those little sunscreen sticks now. They're pretty easy to pop in a purse. I know we have the spray. We go to a pool, our neighborhood pool that we belong to in the summertime. We're there pretty much every single day. And the sun sprays are really nice, but to put that on your face, it just, one, it's kind of gross.
Right.
Hard, you really want to avoid spraying that in one of your open areas like your eyes, but the sun sticks are really nice. I in the summer just buy a whole pack of them and pop them into bags and purses so that there's always one along. They're also they're less likely to get sort of syrupy or watery like the liquid ones in the containers. So to keep one in your car can be pretty easy. Or again, if you're an athlete and you cycle, you could even keep it in your little bag on your bike as a safety, protective. And I love that you brought up the eyeglasses or the sun, wear for your eyes, because with diabetes, we definitely have to be really protective of our sight. Navigating blood sugar is one of them, but also those who have lighter color eyes, light greens, pale hazels or light blue eyes tend to end up, from research, get a little bit more sun damage a little bit easier. So really important points.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And interesting about the lighter eye color. I wasn't aware of that. Are there any other ways that that sun exposure affects your blood sugar levels or other experiences with diabetes?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see a couple of different things happen with the sun, which makes it a little more difficult to navigate. So sometimes the heat will help the insulin to get to where it needs to, and therefore we become more insulin sensitive. Then we also have that hydration piece coming into play. And when we're not hydrated, our insulin does not work efficiently, and therefore you start to see blood sugar go up. Also, some people produce a lot of stress hormones in the heat. Know that a lot of people do not like the hot weather, and that's why they choose not to live in Florida. Get a nice rise in your blood sugar just from that hormone production itself.
Right. What can someone with diabetes do to really prepare themselves for like a whole day outside in the hot sun, for example?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a number of things already. Making sure that you've got enough to drink along, or that there is a water source or a place that you can grab something where you're going to be, whether it's at a picnic or a barbecue outside or an all-day sporting event in the summertime. They can be endless hours of time outside, or even just a day all at the beach or all at the pool, any of those things. I also think of kids who are at camp in the summertime all day. Now, those are a little bit more regulated in terms of camp counselors keeping track and making sure kids are drinking and doing all the appropriate things. But, bringing along a packed bag that's got all of your stuff that might be needed in it, especially again with diabetes. If you're going to be traveling someplace an hour or more away from home and you don't really want to leave that place to come home to grab something that needs to be replaced, having sort of a to-go bag packed. It's got all of your needs, extra syringes or a cooling case for your insulin, medicine to bring along just in case you're there for longer than you expect to be there. Even some things that are not specific to diabetes, but whether it's ibuprofen or some aspirin or Tylenol, those kinds of things can come in handy. I also always recommend when you're going to be gone from the house for a while with diabetes to make sure that you also, especially if you're an insulin user, and have an insulin pump, to have not only a ketone testing supplies along in case of need, but also to have extra sets, whether you're a tubed pump user or a pod user, have extras along, because that could easily come out. Too much time in the water, it could come loose or it gets snagged on something, and all of a sudden now you don't have your insulin any longer. So again, packed up sort of supply bags, I call them to-go bags, are really, really beneficial. It also helps take some stress out of the situation. If you know ahead of time that you're going to be out again for a lengthy period, having some things along that also work in terms of snacks, treatments for low blood sugars along, all of those kinds of things. Diabetes takes planning. For the fun things, it takes some planning and some time ahead thought to be able to say, okay, this is coming. I know I need to have this, and this along, or plan to be here at this particular time. Thankfully, the devices we have today have made life a lot more flexible, but we still have to plan.
Yeah. And another important note is devices overheat too. So taking that into consideration, not leaving your phone out in the direct sunlight, because if you're on a CGM or if that's what you use to deliver your insulin, you're kind of stuck if it's overheated. Meters, same thing. So you want to keep them also in a controlled environment, not just your medications.
Yep.
Right, really good points. Kathryn, I believe you touched upon like stress levels having to do with the heat. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so, and athletics can do this as well. And something that like scares somebody, giving a presentation, going on roller coasters are all some really common examples of this hormone production. But what happens is our body, the cortisol and or adrenaline increases, and that causes a significant rise in blood sugar. So sometimes we can predict it, but not always. So maybe if let's use a kid, for example, if you take your kid to an amusement park and they're about to get on a roller coaster and you see their blood sugar go from 95 to 300 in no time, most likely it's because they're producing some of that hormone production in excitement, anticipation of what they're about to do. So the best way to cover that is with insulin. Ideally, if we can predict it, we can give that beforehand. If you're not on insulin, walking it off or doing something to counteract the stress hormone production. Drinking some more water is another good strategy. But yeah, stress is tough.
Yeah.
And it is.
So let's jump into a little more about exercise, physical activity, and I know, Kathryn, this is mainly your wheelhouse. So could you talk about maybe some types of summer exercises that you prefer, and balancing physical activity with blood sugar monitoring?
Yeah, and Jenny too. She's quite the athlete, and raising two little boys who are quite the athletes.
Thanks.
But some great summer activities, probably the most popular one is going to be swimming. It's a perfect time of year to cool off in the pool or the ocean, a lake, whatever you have accessible to you. And what happens typically in the water is we become much more insulin sensitive. Another big thing to keep in mind is meals around physical activity. If you go into the water right after eating a meal, and let's say this person is on insulin or something that increases insulin in the body, then that digestion slows down as they start moving because the body is focused on fueling the muscles and the lungs for the swimming that they're doing. and therefore blood sugar is very likely to go low. So we really, really need to think about this insulin production during sport and activity. That's probably the most important thing when we're preventing hypoglycemia with activity. Now, the other thing is you're probably going to lose, like if you have CGM, you're going to lose your data while you're in the swimming pool. So you have to come up with a plan to have coming back to check with a meter or reconnect to the CGM temporarily, make sure everything's okay, and then go back out. I know some families will have their child come to them every 30 minutes. For some families, that's too long, they're too fearful, and it's a shorter amount of time. Some are longer, everyone's different. A lot of it depends on how well we can feel our blood sugars and have that feeling of where we're at to know whether or not we need to come out of the water temporarily. But from an insulin adjustment standpoint, typically a reduction is going to be necessary. And this is for most of these steady state activities. So other great examples would be going on a hiking trail or a nice long walk on the beach, going on a nice joyful bike ride. And all of these things are going to have that impact. So people can do, if they're doing insulin at mealtime, they can do mealtime insulin reductions. So delivering less insulin with that meal, really looking at the timing of the meal for how much they're going to reduce it by. If it's long duration activity, they can consider basal adjustments to their overall insulin delivery. So temp basal decrease. And then carb supplementation is a great option as well. So just taking in, ideally it's based on their body weight, taking in carbohydrate per the time spent doing the activity to prevent that hypoglycemia.
And Jenny, did you want to chime in on that with your athletic experience?
Sure. No, Kathryn touched on everything, pretty much what I would have said. It is, we talk about diabetes in terms of management being sort of 3-tiered, right? Management takes some type of medication, insulin being one of the most well-known, right? Oral meds may or may not really make that much of a difference in terms of exercise in the here and now. But then the other two pieces are really exercise beyond the medication and then food. So navigating around, as she said, when is activity going to come in the picture? As an adult, you may be able to time that a little bit more precisely. You can say, okay, I'm going to get up in the morning. I don't have any insulin in my system or no bolus. I don't have any food. Maybe I can go work out. I don't have to adjust anything. Whereas later in the day, you have insulin rolling. Maybe you ate lunch and 2 hours later, you're going to go swim at the pool or you're going to go for a long bike ride. So it takes, like I said earlier, a little bit of planning.
Right.
Kids are not so easy to plan. Like having 2 little boys, I know the variability that I've had in my own navigation of management has definitely shifted because my afternoons get really busy and we could be going and doing one thing. We could go and do, like yesterday, we planned to go to the pool. We got there and there was thunder. So then we were sitting and waiting to be able to get in the pool, which we never did because then it started raining and it kept thundering. So my strategy for managing, I had to sort of circle back around and say, well, my adjustment, I don't need it anymore. I need to kind of cancel that and then make, further adjustments. And that kind of goes along with what kids end up having to do. So I love, Kathryn, you mentioned using carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates. They may be the best bet. They may be the easiest way to navigate during that active time, especially if it wasn't planned to be there. So
great points. So let's touch on, we've talked about the heat, we've talked about exercise. Are there any other tips or pointers for exercising safely in high temperatures?
I would say, and Kathryn probably has a lot more to say about it, but I usually know from personal as well as working with other athletes that if you know the temperature is going to climb through the day and you have the ability to get out earlier rather than later, try to do that, right? Don't get out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the sun is peaking and it's 95 degrees and it's, 89% humidity. You're probably setting yourself up, even if you didn't have diabetes, for kind of a failure situation, right? Now, obviously there are athletes who live all over the place in heat and they've kind of gotten it figured out. But I would say if you can plan it in a more opportune time or time of the day. The other option, obviously, is if you have some things at home, utilize those if it's really going to be a day where you should not be outside exerting yourself to that degree. So,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have to be outside and say you're on an insulin pump, there's a high chance that you're going to need to change out your insulin. So if you are exposed to high temperatures over about 90 degrees, you're going to have to put fresh insulin, or it can lose its potency.
Like a long day at the beach, especially thinking Florida or southern types of temperatures. I remember a conference a couple of years ago in August in Houston that I was at. And one of the days was a day that we had planned some time outside. I had brought my family along. And it was so hot that by the end of the day after dinner, despite not having a meal that I would normally make at home, I knew enough to say, my blood sugar is not responding the way I would expect it to be. I am going to change everything out. So when in doubt, change it out is the general rule of thumb. And it definitely applies in the summertime. If you think your blood sugars are not where they should have been, change everything out, take an injection to get that blood sugar moving down.
Yeah. And one more consideration is a lot of people tend to be more physically active in the summer months. It's because there is more freedom to go outdoors and be on your feet a little bit more. So oftentimes, especially kids, when they get out of school, they need an adjustment in their needs. So insulin needs go down for those months of the year.
So now let's shift a bit to more nutrition. And then I know this is more Jennifer's wheelhouse. So let's talk about choosing healthy summer foods. What are your go-tos? What has worked for you, best for you in the hot summer months through the years? And what are your general summer food tips?
I think that summer, from a personal as well as working with so many other people and families, summer, you envision it as a little bit more relaxing, a little bit more laid back, but things actually pick up in the summer in a less sort of strategic kind of way during, a school year or a typical, fall through winter into early spring. You have a little bit more structure. Summer brings around a little bit more variability. And with that comes a lot more variability with food. And that's because we end up having either a lot more, again, picnics outside, gatherings with friends or family. We may go on vacations, which mean that the food that we're eating is not necessarily, our own choice. In those scenarios, it is kind of a do the best that you can. When you are at home and you have your own ability to choose, you can learn what works best for your blood sugars so that when you are not in your own environment, you're at a restaurant, you're at a friend's gathering or whatnot, then you have the ability to say, okay, this and this and this typically work better at home for me. I'm going to pick these from kind of the food spread, right? And in summer, we have a bounty of food. I mean, really, in early spring, we already are having, fresher early strawberries. We have a lot of the greens that don't do well in heat. And so, we've got spinach and some of the greens that might be available early. Even things like asparagus, they all are really wonderful ways to start moving into using salads as an easy, quick prep. It's pretty easy. Most bigger cities, I would say, and even some smaller communities have really lovely farmers markets. So take advantage of them. They have what is right now in season. We've gotten used to, in this day and age, eating whatever we want because it's typically available year round in our marketplace. But the height of nutrition quality of those foods is actually in and during the growing season, where they haven't had to travel a distance to get to your local market. So make use of your farmer's market, choose the things that come up, make different plans. Say, okay, this, I guess, we're going to do spinach strawberry salads. Oh, the spinach isn't, in season anymore. We're going to move into more of these type of greens, and maybe these types of summer fruits as peaches and plums and those types of things come forward, so that you don't get bored with just thinking, well, I guess summer is my salad season, and you eat the same thing over and over. It gets really boring. So I think, summer foods, focus on your fruits and your vegetables, especially the wealth of vegetables. They are, for the most part, the most blood sugar friendly. We've got, again, all of the greens. We have wonderful tomatoes and peppers, and we've got kohlrabi and all of the radishes and everything that you can kind of bring in. And when you think about eating from not just macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, we also think the reason that we eat food is because it's a basic necessity. And what we get along with those macronutrients are all the micronutrients, all the wonderful antioxidants that come with the reds and the blues and the purples and the greens that we can bring into our plate. I used to teach years and years ago, I used to teach some school-based nutrition to real little kids, which was so much fun. But the easiest concept is to teach them to try to eat a rainbow, right? Try to have at least 3 different colors of fruits and vegetables on their plate. And they were super excited about that. I would get notes from parents saying, my child wants to try this now. Thank you so much. Or my child has said, well, why do we only have green beans all the time? Can't we try this? But summer, again, is the wonderful season to be able to do that. And we talk about other types of macronutrients to include. We're also looking at the ability to do really healthy, lean quality proteins on the grill. You can do grilled chicken, you can grill your steak, you can grill shrimp or salmon or tuna steaks, which is a really nice, healthy way to incorporate the wonders of protein into your diet. For busy summer schedules, you can even do, a whole grill worth of chicken breast. And then you can put them in the refrigerator and plan out, the coming week of, we're going to do this with chicken. We're going to do chicken salad. We're going to do grilled chicken on top of this type of a salad, or as a side here. So there's a lot of way to definitely make summers, I guess, a little bit easier to navigate, even with the variety of things that we end up doing that make our lives busy. If you, again, a little more planning in the picture. Even grains, if you eat them, things like our quinoa and our farro and all of those really quality, good nutrient grains that haven't been processed and all of the good outer, parts of them taken away, which contains the proteins and the fibers. And they can be eaten hot, or in the summertime, many times we just want nice, cooling types of meals. Right. Grains can be cooked ahead. They can be kept in the refrigerator and added a little bit at a time, to salads or side dishes. Beans, black beans, kidney beans, garbanzo beans are another nice protein and low glycemic type of carbohydrate source to add in to many meals. So those are, kind of the ways to navigate. And when you're talking about even how does that translate into eating at somebody else's house, sometimes I really recommend offering to bring something to a gathering, something that you're going to be able to kind of navigate toward. I always opt for bringing like the vegetable tray with a couple of different dips, so that I can really have a full plate just of vegetables because it fills you up. And then you don't gravitate as much to something like the bag of potato chips, which you can eat just one potato chip, right? So that is, maybe a way that you can also manage a little bit of carbohydrate intake, is by filling up more on the veggies and the proteins, so that your stomach actually has a fullness factor to it, and you'll be a little bit less likely to eat the stuff that's more of a treat every once in a while.
Right. So I know you touched upon this briefly, but maybe if we could expand a little bit on meal planning for picnics, barbecues, and vacations. that would be awesome.
Sure. I'm sure Kathryn has some things I'm going to spill the beans. She's recently married, and she recently took a
Yay.
really wonderful honeymoon. And I think vacation would be a great one because there was a lot of difference that had to be kind of navigated there. But like I said, with picnics and barbecues and that kind of thing, sometimes, again, bringing some items that you know work really well for you, offering to be able to do that can be helpful. And for some people with diabetes, there are some food restrictions or some food intolerances or allergies. And so bringing something also allows you to have, again, a go-to that you know is safer for you. Again, at these events, aiming for more of the lower glycemic types of vegetables or salad dishes, even if they have more dressing than you might usually put on at home. If it's mostly vegetables with the dressing, you're still at a bit more of an advantage because it's going to be slower impact on your overall blood sugar, along with the protein sources. Again, those protein sources at a picnic could be deep fried and full of fat, or they could be really nicely grilled, or, I love, what are they? The skewers, like the kebabs. Yes.
Kebab, right.
Those are really great recipes, and they usually include vegetables and protein, and sometimes even fruit like peaches and pineapple in the summertime.
Right.
So, those kinds of things are the go-tos. Think about it almost in what I usually recommend overall is like an 80-20 plan. 80% of the time you're doing what is really, really what your body needs. And then 10% might be reserved for those picnics, barbecues, birthdays, anniversaries, a vacation away. That 20%, I always think of it like feeding your soul, right? You have not had chocolate, I don't know, Boston cream pie or whatever it is in eons, and somebody brought it to the party. Enjoy a piece, right?
Yeah.
If that's what you want to do. But I usually say, the dessert isn't food. It's a treat. It's even something I've tried to teach my kids. Is it food? Is it going to fill you up and keep you, full? Or is it more like, I want to feed my taste buds because it looks really, really yummy to me. So,
Right.
so kind of thinking about it in those terms. I mean, there's no perfection at picnics or barbecues. I think most of it you do the best you can, which is probably what you did on your vacation, right, Kathryn?
Yeah, congrats, Kathryn.
Thank you. And I'm married to a bodybuilder, so meal prepping and planning and being very specific is like what my life has been since I've met him. So just with vacation in general. Now our honeymoon was in Europe. So this is kind of a special example because in Europe, everything is already fresh for the most part. You go to the grocery store, and if strawberries aren't in season, you're not going to find strawberries. So it was honestly like so eye-opening, but like in such a beautiful way, how different it is there and with their eating. The grocery stores are tiny. They're not these huge, huge places, just stocked full of all kinds of prepackaged and processed foods. So Italy, plus with all the walking and everything, I would say, okay, that was a little bit easy from a vacation standpoint. But going on vacation elsewhere, what we do is we always opt for an Airbnb rather than a hotel because hotels with a kitchen are very expensive. If you go for an Airbnb, it tends to be a better price. And then the first thing we do when we get to whatever vacation location it is we go to the grocery store. And you are saving a lot of money by not having to go out to eat all the time. So cooking, still getting those home cooked meals makes vacation honestly more enjoyable. I don't have to worry about blood sugar going off with all these out to eat meals. Of course, you're going to go out to eat at least once, and not having perfect blood sugar every once in a while is not going to hurt you. But definitely those restaurant meals, especially here in the United States, tend to be packed full of fat and a lot more of a challenge to cover.
I mean, if you were in Italy, isn't that like pasta headquarters?
But it's fresh pasta. It's not
Yeah.
pasta.
Right.
So it's like completely different. Plus, as soon as you finish that pasta, you're going on a walk for at least a mile because you're
Right.
exploring everywhere, and they walk everywhere. I mean, they drive like crazy when they do drive, but for the most part, you're on your feet.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, because I was thinking like there's probably, because if I went to Italy, I'd want to have like all the carbs, all the pasta and
Oh yeah, I
everything.
had gelato every day.
Yeah, yeah. But then on the flip side, you're also like exploring, and probably like walking a lot. So then, maybe your carbs are up, but your physical activity is up as well. So then it kind of balances out, right?
Yes.
And that's a good point to bring in for vacations out along with food, as we talked before, even in exercise, is that consideration of, I would expect some of your meals that you ate, you probably actually undercounted or maybe under bolused for, because you expected that the aftermath was including more touring or walking or just, I mean, Italy, from what I know, I've not been there, but like you just walk. And
Yep.
right? It's just a beautiful place to go and walk and see and enjoy. And the people are so, having worked with a couple of clients who are Italian, it's just, people are so friendly, right? So, in consideration of vacation and medication management and that kind of thing, that's another piece that's similar to that exercise adjustment idea. I love that you brought in the Airbnb, because when we go on vacation now with kids, we tend to, in fact, our last time I was in Florida actually for the Touched by Type 1 conference in Orlando. And my boys and my husband came along, and we planned a little bit lengthier vacation there after the conference. And we actually ordered in all of our groceries so that we could have them sent to the hotel. We made breakfast in the hotel every day. We packed our lunch. We packed as much water as the parks would allow us to bring in a backpack. And so then our meal out for the day was always planned for dinner. And because if you know anything about the parks and the hotel or the restaurants, and stuff, you have to have like reservations before you even arrive, or you're going to be eating at like 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
So we had kind of a plan of action. We're going to go here. We've got a reservation. The rest of the day was out of the snacks and the lunches and the stuff that we had packed in the backpack, which from a diabetes standpoint made it a lot easier for me, because I already knew what the carb content was in the sandwich that I made, how many carrots I was eating, or the apples, or whatever it was. Like you said, Kathryn, it just makes it a lot easier to enjoy what you want to enjoy, rather than having to navigate, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is this. Well, I don't really know what I ate for lunch. I kind of estimated or swagged it, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to traveling and packing the essentials that you need, like, what has your experience been with, just preparing for vacations, being able to, like, if you go to a park, being able to bring everything that you need, and just, making sure that you have any accommodations that you need. If either of you want to expand on that.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. I've been doing my fair share of travel lately. So it's really important that you're bringing extra supplies when you are going anywhere, because when you travel, it seems that that's when all of the things go wrong. You drop your vial of insulin and it breaks, or you rip your site out 3 times in one day. It always happens. I don't know what it is about vacation. So definitely bringing the extra. Also, it's important to have a written prescription just in case. I was in France and I forgot my insulin behind at a previous place I was staying, and there was no way to go back to it. So you need to have a backup. Everyone messes up at some point, and you don't want to be left panicking or having to go to the emergency department, which you always can do if you are in desperate need of your medication and you can't get it. That is kind of a last resort option. Definitely going in prepared, having that backpack that you bring all of your supplies in, low treatments, glucometer, spare supplies, just so whatever vacation throws at you or travel throws at you, you're prepared.
I think too, in terms of packing more, we always recommend when we're working with people, especially if you're going to be gone longer than a weekend, to pack double the supplies that you think you could possibly need, double the insulin. I always also recommend, if you're traveling outside of the country, where even a written prescription from your provider may not be well understood, take a picture of your typical medications in their container, right? So that you could be able to show a photo, and then, whatever pharmacy or, medical supply place that you might be able to go to back up that missing piece, you may be able to show a picture that, oh, I see what you need. So those are some of the things that you can definitely do. And then again, if you're traveling distance, a lot of people who have devices such as insulin pumps or continuous glucose monitors, you may need to remember to change the time zone in the device. Some of them, it's done because the device is already linked to time zone, and so the time in it will change for you. Other devices, that's not really the case. So you will need to go in and make sure that once you land at your final destination, you go in and you change the time in your device to your correct location or your correct time zone where you are. And in, all of that comes, as we talked about with, travel, nutrition and whatnot. I think having things along with you during the travel time can be a huge advantage, because you may not know what an airport is going to have available, or depending on what time you come in or fly out, some or many of the restaurants may be closed. You may have access to nothing except a coffee when you really need an apple, or you need something to give yourself a little bit of food. So having some things packed again in your supply bag beyond just medication or equipment becomes beneficial.
Right. So Kathryn, when you experienced leaving your insulin behind, you were able to then in France get more insulin with your prescription?
Yeah, and luckily in Europe, insulin is a lot cheaper. So it wasn't the end of the world. It didn't ruin things, but it was
Yeah.
definitely a huge stressor that
I bet. Yeah. Well,
forget your insulin.
yeah, first don't forget your insulin, but then if you need, then you can get some with your prescription. So that's good to have like the written prescription. Yeah, because I mean, I feel like that's just so typical when you're on vacation, because you're like out of your usual like schedule, your usual groove, and so yeah, that's when things start going wonky. You drop things, yeah.
Well, and the last place you end up looking, you've cleared the closets, you've cleared the drawers that you don't remember to look in that silly refrigerator that's in the desk that's covered by a door. You completely dismiss that, and that's where you had your insulin.
Yeah.
Most important thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you brought up a bit about the time zone changes. So definitely like being aware of needing to adjust the time on your devices. How about how that plays into like the timing of your meal schedule and like, or and your sleep schedule? Like, how do you accommodate for that then in your diabetes management?
Yeah, usually, I mean, in terms of the travel and sleep, and it would even kind of coincide with meals, is usually if you've had pretty lengthy travel, like overseas, like you did, Kathryn, I did years ago, and it really was trying to, whatever time of day you arrive, you really try to make it until the typical bedtime where you are. So if, you've arrived and it's like 10 a.m. your time, but it's like 6 p.m. their time or whatever, you try to stay on the schedule that you've arrived at. So you may be making it well beyond your typical bedtime, but you got to make it till 9 or 10 o'clock so that your body regulates a little bit faster. I mean, those are outside of diabetes, those are just typical travel tips. When my husband and I started traveling a little bit, more distance. And then in terms of meals, you kind of start up with when you land, getting onto the same thing. It's okay, well, it's 6 o'clock in the morning here, but it's midnight where I left. So, but it's time for breakfast here. So let's get into the routine of trying. And that's why adjusting the times in your devices is so important, because pumps especially, and even those using injections who might have differences in their ratios or when they take their basal injection or their correction doses, they may differ based on the time of the day. So you have to really adjust that device accordingly so it's using the right parameter time and the right dose of insulin to suggest for you. If you're at like a 1-to-10 ratio for insulin to carb in the morning, but it's now afternoon where you landed and your ratio is 1-to-15, but your pump still thinks you're in a 1-to-10, like it's all going to be off schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
How was your experience with that recently, Kathryn?
It pretty much followed what Jenny said to the T. Just, as soon as you get there, staying awake and trying to get on their schedule as quickly as possible. But of course, not everyone, like some people are going to have a really hard time waking up that next morning. Jet lag is a big thing. And so they might need to watch out a little bit for their breakfast and what happened. Like if they sleep in for a really long time, like Jenny mentioned, they might have a 1-to-10 for breakfast, but then a 1-to-15 for lunch. And if their first meal is, they've already slept through that and they're at that 1-to-15, and then they dose that for their first meal, they're probably going to wind up pretty high.
Right.
So, taking that into consideration too. The best thing, like Jenny said, is get on their schedule as quickly as you possibly can.
Right. So how about navigating airport security and just like transportation in general? Planes, trains, automobiles. What's your advice?
Well, Kathryn, you go ahead.
Well, so I think my take is to draw the least amount of attention as you have to yourself as you're going through security and in different places of the airport, for example. So whatever you can keep on going through the x-ray machine, just go on through. If it is something that you need to take out, I can't safely go through the machine, find that TSA agent that is, there's usually one designated for like people in a wheelchair or that have to go through the special, like the old-fashioned, I guess you could call them, x-ray machines, and just discreetly let them know that you have a medical device that cannot go through and you need them to check it.
Yeah. Yep. But I would agree. The easiest transition through that whole sort of process for security is, you said it perfectly, the less attention you draw to things, the easier you're going to navigate through. If you go in like bearing all your guns and you're like, I have this, and you have to navigate, and if you go in with a really strong attitude, you're probably going to get that back, right? Whereas, when I go and I don't have a child, or whatnot, it's just me with diabetes. All my supplies are in my bag that goes through the security. I have my pump and my CGM on my body. I go through the line, I put my arms on, scans, and they see my devices. They will always ask. And the biggest thing I say is, I wear an insulin pump. I wear a continuous glucose monitor. It can't come off of my body. Here are my hands. I know you need to swab them. And I've never had an additional question. I've never been asked to show my device or anything. I know people have, but my personal has been that I've never had to show it. And once your hands are swabbed, you kind of go on your merry way and collect your things and keep going. The only time I've ever had to show any of my devices and pull out my letter that I always carry from my doctor that states why I'm carrying all these devices is my husband and I were in Ireland. We were flying from Dublin to, I think it was the Shannon airport. And when we got there, the gentleman wanted to know, all my devices were packed in a bag in my carry-on. And I think it was so tightly packed that they couldn't really see what was truly inside. So I opened it up and showed him, and then he read the letter and he was like, oh, great. And he closed it back up and we just went on our merry way. But outside of that, they now make, for insulin travel and cooling cases, they make them with TSA clearance. So just making sure that you have that type of a product usually means it's going to go through without any questions. So
Yeah,
I think the last time I was stopped, it was because I had peanut butter packets and had nothing to do with diabetes. I had the little Justin's individually wrapped like peanut butter packets. And because it was soft and like squishy, they wanted to make sure it wasn't like open or whatever it was. And I was like, yep, it's just peanut butter. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Have you ever had any concerns about any of your tech when you're in like a foreign country? Like, is there any concern about anything with that?
My only concern has always been, and I think it's taken care of typically because I bring enough supplies with me. It's really just that, is something going to fail? And did I bring or have enough along with me? I've never been somewhere that I've really wondered whether I would be stopped because of it.
Yeah.
Although I know security more recently has definitely gotten stronger in many different places. So that's, I guess, the only consideration I had. I know when we were in Universal in September last year, there were two of the rides that I couldn't, my phone operates my pump on my body, and standing in line to a certain point, you can have it with you. But as soon as you go through like the scanning area to get in line to get on, you can't any longer have your phone with you. And I explained to the guy initially, I was like, well, my phone runs my pump, which is on my body, and I need it on me. And he was like, well, we're going to have to clear all of this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I would have made a bigger stink about it, but there weren't very many people in front of me. Like I literally had 2 minutes to get on the ride and get on it and get off of it. So I handed my phone to my husband and I was like, you just take my phone. And the guy was like, whoa. I was like, no, it's okay. I promise I will be okay. I'll get off the ride in like 2 minutes. But that was, I think, similar to kind of what you're asking in terms of question about, well, what do you do? And that's where ahead of, we went at a time of the year where we knew it was not going to be terribly busy. So I wasn't too concerned to go to the park offices where you can get sort of some passes for what they consider diabetes as a disability, right? I did not do that. Many families do that. I know that Disney actually just changed their policy and now it excludes diabetes as a disability, which is very unfortunate.
Disappointing.
Yeah. It is very disappointing.
Really
for some people. For me, I've never used that card, if you will. But I know for some people, there are definite situations where it may be very necessary. Everybody has their own stuff that they're navigating and dealing with, right? But that's the only real like security kinds of thing I think I've experienced recently.
Yeah, and another point on tech stuff is some of the device companies, for example, Tandem, you can go through their program to get a loaner pump. So in case I break everything, so if I go on vacation and I totally demolish my pump, going with a loaner pump just in case, you're already on top of it and well set.
Oh, that's great. So you could just have an extra one on hand.
Yep, and then you return it once you're back from vacation.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we are getting to the end of our session today, and it doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat. But do either of you have any final thoughts about just generally summer wellness, living with diabetes? Or any just good tidings to wish as we conclude?
Well, I always wish anybody who is living with diabetes, doing the best that you possibly can and outreach for information if you feel like you don't have enough, or you've got questions about things and they're not getting answered, within your own clinical space, there are certainly a whole lot of, private types of options to explore in terms of education. Somebody should really be able to meet your needs where you are and give you what you need, so that you can have your best life with diabetes.
Yeah. And the community is so incredible in the diabetes world. So utilizing the community for support and assistance with questions, and they'll even be willing to give you some supplies if you're out and about and something happens. So
there are
great.
lots of support groups, definitely. I mean, Diabetes Sister has organized what are they used to call them pods, or little groups to get together. Women in a community can get together and just sort of enjoy each other's company, all with diabetes. There are groups that are specific to kids with diabetes. There's a conference in Florida for children with diabetes, even though it sort of encompasses all age with type 1 diabetes now. There are training camps for athletes with diabetes. There are whole bunches of different ways to really find a connection point if you feel fairly alone in your management. And it's not necessarily the education, but it's just like you just want to talk to somebody who gets it like you live it. So definitely online looking, you'll find something to meet your need.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again so much for joining today. It was such a pleasure to speak with you. I just need to read my disclaimer one more time.
That we're not professionals.
Nothing stated today is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, but is instead for information purposes only. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have about a medical condition or treatment before undertaking a new regimen, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking advice because of something we've said here today. So, thank you again for joining. It was an amazing discussion, and I hope you both have a fantastic summer.
You as well. Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.